In today's video, we're taking a look at some NHL trade rumors, focusing on teams like the Montreal Canadiens, the St. Louis Blues, the Anaheim Ducks, as well as the Detroit Red Wings, and we have an update on the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some NHL trade rumors I want to take a look at today. Before that, I just want to jump into a quick note here on the Vegas Golden Knights. In case you missed it last night, the Vegas Golden Knights had a bit of an emergency situation, COVID-related, where their coaching staff all had to go into quarantine just a matter of a few hours before their NHL game last night against the St. Louis Blues. So certainly that's not something easy to deal with. General manager Kelly McCrimmon ended up going behind the bench. Of course, he has a really long, deep history as a coach as well. So not like he was unfamiliar with being a bench boss. So he's able to step in, and they were able to get some help from the American Hockey League coaches that were able to come up and kind of give him a hand on the bench. I'm not really sure what this means moving forward. I haven't seen any further updates yet today. I'm sure there will be one soon, or there might be one by the time this video actually hits YouTube. So if there is, I'll update the pinned comment down below and see. But obviously what we had heard is there was a positive test amongst the coaching staff. So I'm not sure who it was, of course, but because of that, they're all close contacts of each other. So unfortunately, one of them has the virus and the other ones are having to isolate while they determine if they picked it up or not as well. So this could end up being a little bit of a longer term thing. So we will see. Now, another quick note as well, actually, Patrik Laine, of course, was recently traded, as I'm sure you all know by now, to the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's not able to go to Columbus just yet. I know earlier today he had gone from Winnipeg to Ottawa because he went to the capital of Canada to go to the U.S. consulate to be able to file some paperwork that was going to help get him his U.S. work visa. And they were just waiting for that to be processed to get the green light to be able to enter the U.S. and travel to go into Columbus. And of course, he will have to undergo a bit of a quarantine and negative test before he can join the team. Jack Roslovic, who was obviously traded with Laine, was already in Columbus. That's where he lives and where he's from. So he didn't have to go through a whole lot of an isolation period. I believe it was just a 48-hour time frame where he had to get tested and come back negative. So of course, because there was no travel related for him, didn't need to get a work visa either since he's American. So there was a little bit of a quicker process for Roslovic. So he's actually making his NHL Columbus Blue Jackets debut in their game tonight. So we'll see how that goes, but Laine will still be a little longer joining his club, and of course Dubois at the same time will be longer joining the Jets. I mean, he doesn't need to do a work visa because he's from Canada, but he does need to continue to isolate longer before he can join his team. And of course, they're going to want him to have a few practices once he's able to get used to his new teammates, line mates, etc., and likely before he gets into game action. Now, of course, as I mentioned, we have some NHL trade talk today. Most of today's information comes from NHL Insider Trading on TSN and a combination of Elliot Friedman's latest 31 Thoughts blog that was put out yesterday as well. Both publications kind of touch on some of the same points. Some of it's a little bit different as well, but they are both reporting the fact that St. Louis Blues defenseman Vince Dunn is very much likely available here, and they're questioning whether or not Dunn could be done in St. Louis, pardon the pun there. So obviously, Vince Dunn has become like an extra part for St. Louis. There was some talk and some speculation about a possible trade earlier in the offseason before he signed his contract. He was a restricted free agent this past offseason and was a really late signing getting into training camp. And basically with Torrey Krug being there, obviously he replaced Alex Pietrangelo. If they wouldn't have signed Krug, Dunn's role likely would have increased, but they had the opportunity to grab Torrey Krug, so they did. They have Justin Falk, and I must say Falk's playing probably a little bit better, at least from the offensive side of things as well. Than he seems to be getting some pretty good praise there. And they, of course, get Colton Parayko as their top three guys. And when you have enough other veterans there to fill out your 4, 5, 6 roles, that kind of leaves the case of Vince Dunn kind of, being a healthy scratch a lot. So that's not really good for his development. Of course, he's also had a few, not so good games this year too. When he's had an opportunity to play, he hasn't done the best, especially on the defensive side of the game. I kind of wonder if he's kind of lost his welcome here with Craig Berube a little bit. So no guarantee that they rush into anything. Both Sportsnet and TSN both seem to think that if they do trade him, that a team is going to have to come calling and offer up a first-round pick. So obviously that's a steep price to pay, but at the same time, he is a defenseman with a lot of potential. He's still young. I believe he's 24 years old. He's got a very affordable contract, under $2 million, but it's only for this year. He'll be an RFA again next year, but he will have arbitration rights, so that'll help get a deal done if necessary. And Vince Dunn is a guy that very well could be appealing to a number of teams. We've had reports recently that there's at least a half dozen teams that they're looking to make some upgrades on the blue line. So I don't think there's going to be any shortage of interest. The other thing, too, is I wouldn't be shocked if a team came calling and was willing to offer up a first-round pick. I know I've seen people talking on social media thinking that was a steep price based on the fact that he can't get in the lineup and how he's played. But, you know, he had that potential. He's put up the points in the past. And I think a team might be willing, especially where the 2021 NHL draft is not quite as deep as the 20 draft. So I don't know if those first-round picks, especially in the second half of the first round, are really going to be considered quite as valuable. So teams might be more willing to trade them this year than they were last year. Of course, there is even some, you know, reason to think that the 2021 draft could even possibly be, you know, a change of format or pushback or whatever. There's still a lot of question marks around it, but regardless of the fact, it'll happen at some point, and those picks will be available. So we'll see what the Blues do with Vince Dunn. I don't think it's a big rush, but if a team comes willing to pay the price that they're looking for, I wouldn't be surprised if they pull the trigger. Now, at the same time, though, there's been talk that the Blues are kind of willing to pick up a defenseman. So we could even see a swap of D-men, but I think they would prefer to have more of a stay-at-home defensive-style defenseman than somebody who, like Dunn, who's a little bit more of a puck mover, a little bit more risky in his own end. I think they're looking for a different type, different style, because there was talk, you know, that they were having interest in a guy like Travis Dermott in Toronto, for example, and I would certainly say that Dunn's more offensive than Dermott in that regard. So anyway, we'll see what they do. But I wouldn't look for Dunn to likely extend his contract in St. Louis, and he likely does get traded at some point, whether it be now, the deadline, or into the offseason. And of course, as I mentioned, I want to talk about the Anaheim Ducks as well. They're a team that were heavily involved in the Patrick Laine, Pierre-Luc Dubois trade conversations with both the Columbus Blue Jackets and Winnipeg Jets, and they've both failed to land either player. I mean, at the end of the day, the Ducks are a team that's been looking for scoring. They reported again through insider trading that they are indeed still trying to do that. And obviously, there's a couple of big names there that have now been traded for each other that they missed out on, and they're still looking for opportunities to improve things. Now, it's believed that in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade conversations, I think they were more heavily involved in more recently than the Laine ones, they were looking at possibly including a guy like a Rickard Rakell, for example. I know a couple of names that were off limits that were not going anywhere were Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale, which is a wise move for sure. So I'm not sure, besides Rakell, who else was all willing to be included by GM Bob Murray. I know a combination of guys like Max Jones, Sam Steele, Troy Terry. I think one of those guys for sure would have likely been involved, but hard to say exactly what that package was. Either way, they never got real close because it wasn't anywhere near as good as the Winnipeg offer that they were able to capitalize and pull the trigger on. But now they're looking at other areas since those two players are no longer on the trade market. So no real connection to any other particular teams here just yet. But as we just reported earlier, there was a small three-way trade between the Ducks, Sharks, and Senators. Obviously, they're mostly, you know, fringe players or somewhat minor leaguers, so not big names that's going to really have a big impact right away. But I can see them maybe dealing with those same types of teams again, because I know, like in the case of Ottawa, they have enough forwards there, and especially a few veterans, that they probably wouldn't mind trading and shaking things up. So we'll see what the Ducks do. But they're on the hunt for scoring, and if they find the right fit, then they're certainly going to be looking to make some upgrades. Now, in the case of the Detroit Red Wings, they're getting some interest on defenseman Danny DeKeyser. Now, of course, DeKeyser's 30 years old now. He has this year and next left on his contract, $5 million per season, and there's a lot of teams, including the team like the Flyers or even the Devils to an extent, from what I've read, are apparently expressing interest, and they're considering trying to make a deal here with the Red Wings to obtain the veteran defenseman. Now, I'm not sure how interested he is in moving, because he does have a modified no trade, so we don't know what teams he's be able to block or not. He's from Michigan. He's played his entire hockey career between college and NHL in the state of Michigan. I'm not sure that he really wants to move on. I haven't really heard that he'd be interested. Obviously, the Red Wings are in a unique spot here, going through a rebuild, so it's going to be a while before they're really competitive and able to have a good shot at winning. So I'm not sure if he'd rather opt for a chance to go have more success elsewhere. I'm not sure how he feels about things, but they are getting interest. So there's another defenseman there. But of course, because of the money involved, most teams are going to want the Red Wings to probably retain some or sweeten the deal or something to that effect, because obviously, it's a lot of money for them to take off of Detroit's books. But another defenseman there getting a fair bit of interest. Now, when it comes to Montreal, of course, Victor Mété's name is still out there again. Again, like I said, there's a lot of teams looking for defense, and obviously some of these teams could possibly swap with each other, like we saw Columbus and Winnipeg do. But I know teams like Philly as well as New Jersey, as I mentioned. You get other teams like St. Louis, and I don't really think a Mété and Dunn swap would probably get it done. I don't really think that'd be better for Dunn. And going to Montreal, they're pretty deep blue line. I don't think he's going to be any better off there. So I don't see that happening. We know the Pittsburgh Penguins have been looking for defense. I mean, the Penguins did sign Yannick Weber today, and he's on the waiver wire, by the way, as well. He's the only player on waivers. He needs to clear to be added to the roster. Of course, we just seen Jim Rutherford resign today as well, so I'm not sure we'll see a lot out of Pittsburgh here in the short term while they're kind of, figuring out their direction and strategy, who's going to take over. They have a temporary solution, but doesn't sound like they really want to take too long to figure out their more long-term solution in that as well. So be interesting to see what they do, but Mété's name still out there and seems to be connected to more and more teams. I said there's a lot of teams going to be looking for blue line help as the season goes on. You need lots of blue liners to make a solid playoff run, and that's why that some of these teams, they don't really need to make a move. They're just getting the calls, getting the interest, and kind of exploring what's out there for right now. Like I said, especially in Montreal's case, these players probably wouldn't mind a trade because they're going to get more of an opportunity to play, which is good for them. But from the team's perspective, they're not in a rush because they have the extra depth and they're kind of enjoying that cushion right now. You never know, they could play one more game and get a bunch of injuries, and now that player becomes more important. So they need to take their time and be careful here. But clearly, based on all the latest talk around the NHL, there is a lot of defensemen that are gaining a lot of interest here. And so between DeKeyser and Dunn and Mété and Dermott, a lot of younger D-men that could be on the move here and getting tons of interest. So we'll see what happens. We see some trades. As I mentioned before, I don't know if we're going to have a busy trade deadline. I think we're going to see a lot more than usual activity ahead of time because of the quarantining rules and isolation, everything they need to go through to get settled on their new teams. They're going to, obviously with a short season especially, going to want to get this stuff taken care of sooner than later. But there's so many unpredictable kind of things happening this year between, you never know when you're going to run into a COVID issue and it's going to impact your roster or your coaching staff, like you saw with Vegas yesterday. And, anything can happen there as well. I mean, and you could be finding a different looking roster just like that, which is obviously going to have a big impact. So we'll see what happens, but certainly that's the latest trade talk from around the NHL. I'd love to know what your thoughts are, so leave me your thoughts in the comments. We can discuss further what we think we're going to see out of the teams discussed here today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.